Welcome to Travel Secrets with me, Tanya Rose, the podcast sharing wisdom for fellow travellers. Each week, I ask my guests to reveal their 6 travel secrets and the holidays and adventures that surround them. Today, my guest is my lovely friend, Ciara Parkes, Chairwoman and Director of Public Eye, the international public relations talent agency that she started 32 years ago, I think the same time that I started Mason Rose, and we have known each other for many, many years. Ciara loves travel. It's her passion, and if she gave up publicity tomorrow, she said that she would be an explorer and an adventurer, and you actually were the explorer for Tatler for 4 years. She has so many travel secrets and travel stories, from being attacked by a hippo to food, traveling around Vietnam and being taken to restaurants by number 2 and number 8, which we'll hear all about. Her husband is a travel photographer and automotive photographer, so the photography within her articles are incredible. Welcome, lovely Ciara. I am so happy to see you, and I can't wait to hear your travel tales.
Thank you for having me, Tanya. I couldn't be happier to be here. I'm delighted to be here.
So before we get into your travel secrets, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and about how travel has impacted the person that you have become today.
I love travel since I was a child. My father worked for Nestle for many years, and he travelled the world with the company, and we always went with him. So I was fascinated by foreign countries, and I was delighted when we were allowed to go out and explore from a very young age. And I was always amazed that I actually didn't do something with regards to travel. However, the job I did end up doing at Public Eye, being a publicist, has allowed me to travel. I've been to many places all over the world and travel with my clients. And I have seen sort of pretty much the far-flung corners of it all. But I think that private travel, your own travel, when it's on your time, not on somebody else's time, has got to be the best travel, because you don't need to adhere to a time frame. When I travel with people for my work, I'm traveling on somebody else's time frame. But yes, we've spent travel is what we like to do when I'm not working and my husband's not working. He does the same. He travels a lot for work. So sometimes it's the case that one or either of us have been to a place for work and decided to return there to explore it properly.
And you have a 10-year-old son who has travelled more than most people in the world. I think last year you took him to Patagonia, Argentina and Peru.
Yes, he does travel with us a lot. He absolutely loves travel, and you would think a child of that age would not be interested in sitting in the back of the car looking out of a window, but he is. He's very well travelled. He also loves food. He's a brilliant chef himself, and he loves to experiment with. He'll try anything. So he's very easy to travel with, and it's a delight. Quite often we'll hire a Hilux or something, and they'll have a bench seat in the front, so the 3 of us will be stuck in the front of the car, driving enormous distances. We drive, but when you're not on somebody else's time frame, you just stop off wherever you want, and it's a joy.
So let's get into your travel secrets. What is the number one destination you think everyone should go to once in their lifetime?
For me, it would be a South American country. We love South America. In fact, we have considered living there at some point in our lives. But my husband lived in Chile. He also lived in Bolivia for a while. I speak Spanish. I don't speak Spanish yet. I hope that I will, and our son will be learning it. But I think that the South American people, the continent is just full of such joy. It's full of colour and life, incredibly kind people, massive joie de vivre. The music, I think that South American music is some of the best music in the world. And to sit in a cafe on a street corner and listen to live music, especially when you're not expecting it. But on many occasions, we've been sitting in a cafe or just hearing street music, and there is a fiesta coming down the street, and there is a brass band. They love their brass, and I think that those memories that music marries with the food and the smells and the atmosphere, it leaves an indelible mark in your brain that it's so easy to be transported back there, and you can listen to that music back at home and it takes you back there immediately.
Do you have a favourite country in South America?
I love Argentina. We've been to Argentina quite a few times. I first went to Argentina and Patagonia about 20 years ago. But Peru really is a very beguiling place because you've got the desert coast, you've got the Andes, and then you've got the Amazon. So it's quite, it's unusual to be able to drive a very wild desert coast and then travel up through the Andes, across the Andes and down into the Amazon Basin. It's got everything and it's quite beautiful. I mean, I find it's a very visited country. And I think I mentioned to you once before that Maria Tistina who's a friend, was very surprised that we were doing the trips that we were doing across North and South Peru, because there is danger. I think the biggest danger in South America is the driving, though, because it's so dangerous driving in the Andes. They're often single track roads. There are kamikaze bus drivers driving those roads who are on coca leaves. And on the first time we visited there, we saw 3 bus crashes that had just gone over the edge and probably fallen 2,000 feet, everyone killed, still flames and smoke coming out of the buses. It's very dangerous. And driving there at night, you can't reverse because it's too dangerous to reverse. So if you meet an oncoming car, especially a bus, the buses expect you to get out of the way.
Oh my goodness. It's
very dangerous driving at night in the Andes.
So the tip is don't drive at night.
Don't drive at night, but also if you're thinking about plotting a trip in the Andes, double the time you've allowed for it, because when you look at it on a map, it doesn't take into consideration the formation of the road in the bends. So therefore, it will take you double what you expect it to take. And that's when the night catches up with you and you're going to try and get somewhere else. And there's nowhere to stop in between. Quite often you might drive for 2 or 3 hours and not see a house. I mean, you certainly wouldn't get anywhere to sleep.
Oh my goodness me. That takes us nicely onto the next travel secret. What's the most unexpected journey or travel trip you've ever been on?
The most unexpected journey, I think the most extraordinary journey was, the reason we went to Peru in the first place is that I had gone to Oxfam and found a diary of a woman, one of the Guinness family, in the late 1800s, who had gone to Peru. She'd gone from Argentina across the border to Bolivia and gone to Copacabana, which is on Lake Titicaca. And I had been completely absorbed by this journey and how long it had taken her. It was a very unusual thing for a woman to do in those days. And so we decided to follow her route, which is the first trip we took to Peru. And we followed that route. But one of the places she went was a place called Penu. Penu is a very distant place, and you have to travel the Andes traverse the Andes to get there. And we had been caught out with the length of time it was taking us. We had arrived at a town we thought was a different town. They weren't signposted, and we still had another 4 or 5 hours to go. We thought we were arriving to the right place, and we had another 4 or 5 hours to go, and we had to drive it in pitch black. And then there was an electrical storm. It was so dangerous. The water was coming down from the mountains above us onto the roads we were on, and people were going home at night, and the roads were unlit, and we nearly hit about 3 children and families just travelling home in pitch black, and the rain was lashing that the windscreen wipers couldn't cope with the water. Gus was asleep at this point because he'd been driving for so long. I was driving and I had Joni Mitchell on, and I remember going, come on, Joni, can you please get us to Penu? Get us to Penu, because Penu was the only destination that we could get to. It was anywhere that you could stay.
You're
Anyway,
so adventurous.
we got
my
there about
goodness.
midnight and the hotel was shut. They opened it for us. But yeah, it was a very scary journey. It was a very unexpected journey, but we were very grateful to be there. And you realise that no wonder people believed in St. Christopher so much, being the patron saint of travellers, because we really feared for our lives, and also, more importantly, other people's lives, because it was so easy to have hit somebody in those conditions.
Wow, that really is extraordinary. What's your most underrated travel experience, or even overrated? Where have you been that you thought was going to be marvellous and was terrible? Or where did you go where you weren't expecting it to be great and actually was fantastic?
Well, weirdly, we always travel long haul to places and then travel around. And we went to Tarifa last year, to a village just past Tarifa, just to stay for Easter. And it was the most beautiful beaches there. I've really never, it's sort of on the, only probably about 50 kilometres from Cadiz. And the beaches are amazing. There was nobody there. Beautiful surfing, amazing cocktail bars, and easy. I mean, it took us an hour and a half to get there on a plane. It was just fantastic.
So
I was
somewhere
just
you
amazed.
weren't expecting to be fantastic. I haven't actually been, but yeah, apparently it's really great.
It's absolutely
amazing
great.
Beaches.
Yeah, and it's so close to England. We were so lucky to be there. We were always expecting to be on a plane for a very long time, and just to be there that quickly. And it was baking hot. It was stunning. It was full of wildflowers. I think that's amazing. It's in the hills and the mountains, come down to the sea, and the whole of the backdrop of the house we were staying in, which was on the beach, was just a mountain of wildflowers. And it reminded me of reading Heidi when I was a child.
Oh, and did you take your son?
Yes, of course. He was enjoying a mojito mocktail in the cocktail bar, which had the most amazing Spanish flamenco guitarists playing there in the evenings, and it was just stunning.
So lovely.
Beautiful.
I remember you telling me that you took your son somewhere that was totally different, where you were fossil hunting or something. What was that?
That was Patagonia. Yes, Bo was 4. He was about to turn 5, and he was obsessed by dinosaurs and therefore fossils. He's got a big finds cupboard in his room, which is a big old Georgian cupboard full of finds of things that he's found all over the place in the world. In his fossil cupboard, he's got things like porcupine quills. Weirdly, we were travelling through Italy and saw something squashed by the side of the road which had black and white things sticking out of it. And I said, that looks like a porcupine. That can't be a porcupine. There aren't porcupines in Italy. And my son piped up, yes, there are porcupines in Italy. It's the only place in Europe you'll find a porcupine. You think, how do you know that? He was 7 at the time. And we looked it up, and that is true. Anyway, so we collected the quills from the side of the road. Those are in his finds cupboard. He has all sorts of things in there. And one of the things he has in there is a very large dinosaur tooth, which we found when we took him fossil hunting when he was 5 to Patagonia. It was a surprise for his 5th birthday. And we travelled to Argentina, flew down to Patagonia, and went to this most amazing dinosaur museum in Chile, one of the Welsh-speaking towns there. And they have an Allosaurus there, one of the only existing Allosaurus skeletons in the world. And we took him there for his 5th birthday. And then we spent the next 3 or 4 days fossil hunting in the hills beyond. I mean, there's no one lives there. It's a very, very barren place, Patagonia. And we were out fossil hunting for 3 or 4 days. And then we found a very beautiful, huge dinosaur tooth.
Gosh, that goes back to my second question, which is unexpected. That's extraordinary.
That was unexpected to find that. It was very exciting when we found it, though.
That's amazing.
But you can go to Patagonia and you can go on digs there if you want to. I mean, you could join digs, but I mean, as well, you can drive across the plains of Patagonia, and at certain points, what would have been the original fossil beds of the sea, you can see all sorts of things that are quite unexpected.
Gosh, how fabulous. So let's go on to a much more mundane but very important question. We all love food. We all love drink. It's so much part of our lives and travel. What do you like eating? Where do you like eating? Let's just talk generally about food and drink and travel.
I think it informs so much of your travel. I think that you remember, there are places that you have an affinity to food. I remember going to Russia once and not liking the food. I mean, of course, there are places in Russia where I would love the food, I'm sure, but the food that I had eaten there, I had not liked. And then I go to South America, and I love the food there. And so it sort of creates an affinity with the country or the continent. And I think that that's very important. And also the smells. But I think where there's such a commonality in food is that you would go and have a fabulous seafood platter. You know, you could do that in Brighton, you can do it in South America, you can do it in France. And if something's cooked well, it's, you know, you really can't go very wrong with it. I think street food's an interesting thing. I think that some of the best food in the world will be street food. It's just knowing what, you know, you have to take a chance on it. I mean, we've all eaten street food and haven't felt well from it. And I think that is, you know, I think you mentioned earlier about me being in Vietnam. We went to Saigon, and we were taken on a street food tour on the back of motorbikes. They take you on the back of the motorbikes. They came to pick us up from where we were. The women that were taking us were probably about 5 foot tall. They were tiny, driving us bigger people on the back of their motorbike. But we went to all sorts of places, including where they blew up frogs and then roasted them. Oh. And one of the restaurants, they offered us pig's nipples, which was a big no from me. No. But some of the foods that we ate on the side of the road on that tour were spectacular. Some of the best food I've ever eaten in my life. I mean,
actually, I loved reading the article that you wrote for, I think it was Tatler's Explorer, when you were in Vietnam, saying that they had huge families and that they were named by number 1, number 2, number 3, and that number 3 person took you to number 8's restaurant or something. It was just brilliant.
That's true. Number 3. So they have given names, but because their family refer to them by their numbers, it's very often the case that happens across all sorts of families and all different social divides. But they refer to, and then the name sticks. So the girl who was driving me on her motorbike, she was number 3, but she was just called 3. So, 3 took us and to number 8's restaurant.
That's just brilliant. It made me really giggle when I read it. It was fantastic.
Amazing.
So you're quite adventurous eating your street food, and it is wonderful when you don't get ill, but you do have to take a chance, I think, don't you?
Yes. I mean, God, you can get really ill from it, though.
And then talking about food in the UK, because obviously you look after all of these actors and you obviously take them out and you're doing publicity tours and things. Do you have favourite restaurants in London?
Well, anything of Jeremy King's. Obviously, Jeremy is the greatest restaurateur in the world, and we love his restaurants. He's done an amazing job with the park and bringing Caprice back as the Arlington. I know I bumped into you there the other day. Yes, any of his restaurants, and also, I mean, our clients are regulars with all his restaurants, so, and they're very kindly sort of accommodate us and look after our clients there. But I mean, they're great friends of Jeremy's, most of them anyway. So, but yes, I don't know. I've got favourite restaurants. I mean, there is a restaurant that I love in the Brighton lanes called Riddle and Fin. I don't know if you've ever been there.
No, it's
a fish restaurant, and I'm not a massive fish eater, but I love things like smoked salmon and prawns and seaweed and things like that. And we got engaged, and I went to pick up my engagement ring from an antique jeweller in the lanes. And while they were waiting for the sizing of the ring, we went in and had lunch at Riddle and Fin, and they do the most. I mean, you know, if you want to go for a special lunch, they do lobster thermidor and caviar, and we drank Chablis, and we had the most massive blowout lunch. It was
that's
fabulous.
A great tip, because Brighton is such a fab place to go. So I will definitely put that on my list.
It's a great restaurant. It's a great restaurant.
Fantastic. So let's go on to the next travel secret. What is your top travel tip?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Well, one of the things that not everyone knows is if you're driving at altitude, the gases in your fuel tank will expand and give you a false reading on your petrol gauge. And if you're driving in the Andes, that is a very dangerous situation to be in, because there are very few petrol stations. And so you really need to keep on top of your fuel consumption. So you have to be very careful and to be aware that you will have a false reading on your fuel tank.
That is a very niche tip. That is a very Ciara Parkes tip.
Have you had that tip before?
I certainly have not.
No.
Don't take too many clothes and shoes in a bag. That's a brilliant tip.
It's something, I mean, also things like having pens about your person. Those pens will expand and explode all over your clothes. Oh. Don't put pens in your luggage. When you're traveling.
Did you get altitude sickness when you went?
Yes. Cocoa leaves are the things to chew. We got to the point, we were very, very high in the Andes once when we were driving over to Cusco, and we had to stop because we were both shaking. You can get terrible shakes. And if you're driving, it's quite dangerous to have the shakes. And we actually knocked on a woman's door and asked her if we could have a cup of coffee. And she made coffee and put some sugar in it for us to try and mitigate the shakes, because that is quite dangerous. It
I've
also
only
makes you
ever
just
had
tired.
It once.
Oh, where did you have it?
I had it at Dunton Hot Springs in Colorado.
Did you?
Yeah, and
I wonder how high that is.
It's high, but it took me like 2 days to get there. And I had dinner with the owners the night I arrived, and I suddenly, literally stood up and fainted. And I felt so embarrassed because I thought they're going to think I'm drunk. I've only had half a glass of wine, but it was absolute altitude sickness. And they said, oh, don't worry, it happens all the time.
I bet it does. Yes, I can imagine it does. It's quite interesting how people are taken by it, because some people don't have it at all. And then some people have it. So when you climb Mount Kenya, they don't know, obviously, who's going to have to be taken off. Oh, really? Because they have to be on standby to take people off, because some people get it so badly and can't actually move.
So what, they helicopter them off, do they?
Yes.
Oh, really?
I think they have to get them to a certain position before they helicopter them off. But I had some friends who did Mount Kenya, and I think the same on Kilimanjaro as well, that they do it. They have to get them down because they're so ill. I mean, it's a horrible thing, and we got it quite badly, but not that badly. I mean, we were able to function. We just didn't feel particularly well.
A cup of tea with sugar did it for you?
Cup of tea. I will always take a flask now, because obviously you might drive for an hour to not see anybody or anything to stop at. Take sugary things. Take the coca leaves. You can buy them in sweet form, like in a sort of a boiled sweet. Suck those incessantly, and it really does actually help.
Is that like CBD oil? Does it sort of zone you out?
No, it doesn't actually at all. It's like it takes the edge off things. It's not like having a gummy. I could imagine what having gummies like. And then I think, but it definitely stops the whatever it is that's giving you this sort of altitude problems. Yeah.
So let's go on to the next travel secret. What is the most poignant travel experience you've ever had?
Well, that's a very interesting thing to have to think about. I went to, one of my favourite places we ever went to was a place called Jack's Camp in Botswana, the very famous Jack's Camp. And we were writing an article, we were doing a travel piece about Botswana. We had canoed down the Okavango Delta through the Cylinder Spillway, and the rains had really flooded it, because the rains in Angola had been so bad they'd flooded it. And we had been fly camping on the side of the spillway. We canoed the whole way with all of our kit with us. And the second night we camped, we were asleep in our tents, and I could hear hyenas very, very close. And then they were, very close. They were definitely in the camp. And then there was only us. There was only us and three other people that were traveling with us, who were sort of guides. One canoe would go ahead in the day to set up a camp, and then there was just us and a guide. And a hippo had got out of the water, and it was literally right outside our tent, sniffing around, and there was just a piece of waxed cotton between us and it. It was quite profound. But when we went to Jack's Camp, after we had left the spillway and stopped canoeing, we were taken. I'm not together sure I should say this because it's such a special thing. I know that Jack's Camp likes to do it, but to suffice to say, you go out on the Makadikadi salt flats, which are huge. They're the size of Scotland. They're salt flats that have no life in them in the winter, and in the summer they are filled with crustaceans that grow from under the salt flats, and a million flamingos come in, and
yes, I've seen
some are there. We were on the Makadikadi flats at night on our on bikes, and we were then taken to have dinner under the stars. It's like being in a snow globe of stars, because it's completely flat and there's a million stars there. And then just as you think it couldn't get any better, you're having dinner. They've got hot embers under each of your seats to keep you warm, because you're out in the out on the salt flats. They told us that there was some mammoth bones that had been found nearby. Would we like to see them, to bring our torches before we returned to the hotel, back to the camp? And we took our torch, and they took us for a walk into the middle of the flats, and there was a brass 4-post bed with duvets and pillows and all of our night things and our toothbrushes, and we slept there under this snow globe of stars in the middle of nowhere on the Makadikadi flats, in dust with the sound of elephants in the distance, and slept there for the night.
Beautiful.
It was a massive surprise. It was so
it
beautiful.
wasn't at all mammoth bones.
Nothing.
They were just taking you
to a bed for the night.
That sounds incredible.
It was incredible. It was very, very, very moving.
That's only ever happened to me once, when I was in Mauritius and I was staying in a hotel in a beautiful room, and they said, have dinner with the general manager or drinks. And we were having drinks, and then suddenly they said, oh, wouldn't you like to see the royal suite? And I said, yes, we'd love to. And when we went into the royal suite, suddenly I kept seeing all my things in the royal suite. And they had moved us into quite the same as having a 4-poster under the stars, but how magnificent. That sounds amazing.
Unbelievable. It was actually quite chilly, and they lit a fire nearby as well for us. But they weren't there. It was just us,
just you. How
in
romantic.
The middle of nowhere. It was the waking up to that sunrise in the morning was like nothing I've ever seen.
That really is a poignant experience. And that's at Jack's Camp, is it, in Botswana?
It's fabulous. Jack's Camp is one of the most beautiful places you'll ever visit.
So I asked you to bring a photograph.
Yes.
Can you show us the photograph and just tell us how that sums up travel to you?
This photograph is taken at Pumarimri, which is a beautiful lodge on the side of the Amazon in Peru. We travelled 7 days to get there, and we had just arrived. We were exhausted, and I'm sitting on a balcony overlooking the Amazon in the middle of nowhere in the jungle, and my son had just pointed out that we were surrounded by poison dart frogs. So you have to keep your eyes and wits about you there. And bullet ants, incidentally, outside on the veranda, which are very painful indeed. But I was just contemplating the journey that we had come from the Desert Coast Highway, 3 days crossing the Andes at perilous at times. We were up in the clouds. We were so high, driving through the clouds. And then coming down into the Amazon Basin, where you see the plants start to, the plants grow on anything. So they'll grow on a wire, on a telegraph wire, or they'll grow on a tree, and there's all sorts of amazing plants. You start to, as you come into the Amazon, that are growing everywhere when you've come from a very barren Andes. And we had just arrived there, and I was just watching the Amazon, watching some parrots, red macaws, off our balcony, and I was just amazed at how beautiful it was. And
it's
that picture
an amazing photograph. But tell us about the hat, because the hat is fantastic.
The hat in Peru, the villages, all the villages wear hats. The women, men, and children wear hats. Mostly, the children don't get them till a bit older. They're very expensive. They're woven intricately from reeds. They grow very fine reeds to make them. They're essential because of the heat. But the hats are also different, woven a different way for each of the villages. And they're very tall woven hats with a very large, full turned up brim. And then when it rains, they sit at the side of the road with their legs crossed while they wait for a lift, with the hat pulled down, and they turn their brim down so that the water runs off it. And you see a lot of people standing around with water just dripping off them. But they're waterproof. They're brilliant. So we have our hats that we'd bought from various villages. And I'm sitting in my hat overlooking the Amazon in a very happy place.
It's a gorgeous photograph, and it really sums up your amazingly adventurous life in travel. It's incredible. There's no Ibiza or Maldives for you.
No.
It's South America. And as you say, you want to be an explorer. So before we finish, what's next for you? Where are you going next?
I think we're going to drive Colombia next year. It is in our time we want to do the Pantanal in Brazil, one of the sort of few untouched places in the world, I think, that's still accessible. And I think the ultimate dream would be to drive the Desert Coast Highway through the whole of South America from north to south, right down to the tip of Argentina. It will be an adventure that would probably take us about 4 months, but I hope that we might do that in the coming years.
It's been such a joy and a delight. Thank you so much for joining me. And it's made me want to go to South America even more.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.